Sorry, I'm coming again with my French English, but I'm replacing my young colleague Estelle Serpolay, who has an experience about how diversifying the crop with the French farmer. So Estelle, the photo of Estelle, it is her work. So our challenge is how to recreate diversified cultivars and how to exploit the remaining diversity from ex situ conservation in a large scale. So this seed has been put in freezer in between 17th and 18. It's a pity to leave this seed in the freezer. So we are imagining how to make new variety with them. So our first hypothesis that we need diversity for organic farming, so to go from university to diversity, and many people are explaining the interest of diversity now. And our second hypothesis that we need diversified cultivated plant and modern variety are homogeneous, you know that, but also ex situ landraces, most of them have lost part of the diversity. And we have a research experience at the beginning of farm seed opportunities. It was between 2007 and 2010 to measure this loss of diversity. It was my colleague Isabelle Goldranger from INRA who have managed this measurement. So the colored represent the intersect diversity of several landraces. So it is a modern variety. It's quite homogeneous. It is normal, but it is two landraces, one from the mountain in France and one from Italy, and we observe the same homogeneity. And the equivalent of Haute-Loire in France, it is Solina in Italy. This landraces was stayed in the mountain, and it has kept its intersect diversity. It's the same for Rouge de Bordeaux, more or less. And they have nearly the level of the diversity of mixture. So when we have plenty of accession in the gene bank, in fact, we have one representative of the diversity, but we have lost most of the intersect diversity of these landraces. And we have other observation for Rouge de Bordeaux, is a very famous French landrace of bred wheat, and we observe also the diversity of Rouge de Bordeaux, which remained in farm, and the one who was stored in a gene bank. It was just a little part of the diversity, and the farmer who have used this sample were not able to recover diversity, and the farmer who have exchanged the sample of Rouge de Bordeaux, they have a greater diversity. So it is why we are thinking about how to boost the diversity in our field in Europe. And if we are looking at the result of the collect of genetic resources by the European project, the project I showed you just before, we have nearly 1 million, more than 1 million accession of cultivated plants in the gene banks, but very, very, very few are used effectively in plant breeding. So from this context, we have explored two ways with the farmers to increase diversity within the variety. Within Solibam, it was a project nearly 10 years ago we began, and we worked from 2000 and 2005 to develop new idea, new strategy for diversity. We have two experience, one in buckwheat, one in bred wheat. And to try, this one. And at the beginning, with the farmer, we were thinking how we can do. We try dynamic population is very simple. We put several landraces all together in the field, and we are managing the evolution, looking at at the field what they are producing, and we try, because some farmers and some researchers thought that it was more efficient to cross at the beginning the landraces, the plant 2 by 2 to boost recombination. So we tried both strategy for landraces, for buckwheat and bred wheat, and we began some years ago. And we have now this population on the farm. And some farmers and bakers try to select within the population. So as an example of the result with, on bred wheat, we began to observe the result of these strategies in 2018, and farmers began the selection what they wanted in this population, and bakers also, because the bakers can feel what kind of grains they wish for the flour and the bread. So we estimate that bakers were able also to make plant breeding. And after we observe the results, so we observe the lead and component and the qualities in this population, and what was the most important, and it was not the breeding strategy, but it was the human selection, it is normal, and then the location. And in the last position, it was the strategy we have adopted at the beginning. So the simple is the best. And the farmer and the baker, I finally conserve all the diversity we have put at the beginning. So they have influenced what they wanted to bake and to cultivate, but they have conserved all the diversity. So we can do simply the mixture and select what we want. And more recently, we were thinking how to do with this accession in the gene bank. And we tried another strategy, and my colleague named them diversified oriented population, DOP, mainly based on a very large number of ex situ accession. So this DOP is a personalized mixture of several accession with one or several common phenotype trait requested by the farmer. For example, if the farmer wants to rediscover spelt, but he has agricultural condition where he needs very early accession, so we try to find several accession which answer to the earliness, and we make a mixture of all the early accession of spelt. And the objective is to provide a very diversified basis of population for the farmer, and to help them to adapt to the environment and to help them to find after the traits they need. And it's in order to speed the breeding process and to facilitate the adoption by the farmers. So our step, we have, the first step was to looking for the accession. It's not so easy because at the beginning, we have to take care of the history of the species. What have happened to the variety, to the sample we can find in the gene bank. For example, artificial mutagenesis began in the 70s, and most, if you want barley, you will find, if you have all cultivars, you have plenty of chance to find varieties from artificial mutagenesis. And it is why we are carefully looking at the history of the species to look at what time the breeders try to new technique of selection, and we try to find samples that had been stored in the gene bank before the period of the modern plant breeding. We are also listing this diversity. We are looking for many gene banks, not only in the European, but also from United States, because in United States you have begun earlier than in Europe to store genetic resources. And we can find very old landraces from France here, and very often we request accession from United States. Then, because we are receiving only very few amount of seed, it's not easy for the farmer to increase from 30 seeds, for example. So the first step remain in our lab, and we try to amplify from 30 seed. We try to have some grams of seed to be able to distribute to the farmers. So for nearly 2 years, we are multiplying these samples, but also observing the first, some traits to be able to give some indication to the farmers. And the next step is the creation of this mixture, and we do it with the farmers. So for these 2 years, we observe the accession, we observe some traits, main traits, the earliness, the colors, the tillering, the lodging, and so on. We are able to describe this accession very with some traits, and the farmer can say, I want to the early one, I want to the tall one, I want to the... And we mix them, and sometimes they want the earliness and some characteristics of the grain, so we make the mixture according to their wishes, and we distribute this mixture to the farmers. And in fact, we have begun the experience with the Liberate wheat or polar wheat. It is a form of Durum wheat that which we are able to make pasta in the northern Europe, because the Durum wheat we cannot grow it in the north of France, for example. But Liberate wheat we can do pasta with it. It has been forgotten in Europe, but it's a very, very interesting wheat, very beautiful also. And we started the experience in 2016 with the Liberate wheat, and with 197 accession. 200 is a good number to manage. So we observe them for 2 years, and we observe 25 traits, and we distribute our DOP in 2018, and we have continue in 2019. So some pictures. So at the end, 157 accession has been included in 29 personalized populations, DOP, and the population were established according to 1 or 2 4 traits requested by the farmers. Each population included 3 to 77 accessions, depend of the wishes of the farmers. 44 farmers have participated at the first experience, and only 15 accessions didn't find their place in the population, and we have created the orphan population, and sometimes we are distributing this population not wishes by the others. So every accession are finally used. They are used in many places, so we are redistributing this diversity in many places, in many environments, and we think that this stored diversity will continue to evolve in many places, in many conditions, pollinated by many kind of neighbor. And it is our ideas today that we are trying on several species. So, but the problem is to have the means, because we have a small team, so we can manage 1 or 2 species at the same time. But we are thinking how we can increase this strategy to give a new future of the genetic resources of the gene bank. It's a pity to leave so this diversity, because when we observe 2,000 of accession, and we know that there is other 5,000 in the freezer, it's very a pity, because this is so beautiful. We have so diverse character in this 200 accession, and we are thinking there is a 4,080 remaining in the freezer. How can we do to take out this accession again in the field? So it is our experience. We wish to increase this experience. So we have begun with alfalfa, oat, and spelt, and I hope we will try the means to go further and to have And also, we wish to observe on farm what happened to this population. So we have a feedback from the farmer who received in 1918 the first DOP, and they told us that the characters they have chosen, they were able to find these characters, these traits in the mixture they have received. So now they will evolve these mixtures, but our choice was pretty good to begin this selection. Thanks for your attention. But before closing, I should like to mention that we are in my city. I am very strongly involved in the organization of the Organic World Congress. So it will be a big feast of organic agriculture, but also on seeds. We will have a place in the center of the city devoted to seed and to diversity, to taste diversity. So it will be the feast of organic agriculture, but also the feast of diversity, and also mainly during the pre-conference on seed, we will have two days, and we will organize all together these 2 days of seed. Thank you. So if you want more information, I can...
Thank you, Veronique. We have time for a couple more questions. I will also mention there is information about the Seed Ambassadors Seed Conference that will be hosted just prior to the Organic World Congress. There's information in the program on the last page, and registration will be opening up in the next couple months here.
Yes.
And the vision of the event is that it's very participatory, facilitated conversations about how we develop a seed network internationally and knowledge exchange internationally. But the event will also include a field tour of one of the farmers who's actually with us at this event, Jean-Marchal, who's a diversified CSA vegetable seed farmer in Rennes. And I had the fortune to visit his farm last winter, and I was struck by how similar the climate is to here.
Yeah.
They have the same weeds, they grow the same crops, they grow the same seeds. So it's a wonderful opportunity to network with someone that has a lot of potential for seed exchange as well. So more information on that coming soon. But back to any questions about this event and or the presentation on the breeding for diversity that Veronique presented.
Yes. Yeah, I have a question, Veronique. How much, I know that you plan to do evaluations on the farmers' acceptance or impression with the mixtures you gave them, but how much have you learned so far about variation amongst farmers in how they evaluate? For example, are all of them thinking of maintaining these as mixtures or of selecting within the mixtures, and is there variation amongst them into how they will manage those?
It is a new experience because we are used to work with at least 10 farmers in this group. It is a group of Poitou-Charentes. It is center of France. And with this experience, they are much more numerous to come to the meetings, and they were very enthusiastic to have a new diversity, not only on landraces, but a mixture that will be able to manage themselves. And for the moment, they kept interesting in the population, so we will contact them to see whether they have sown the next generation. This is a new experience, this experience of very diversified mixture. It is a next step. We have begun by landraces, by mixture with 5, 7 population, but we have a next step, so it's an adventure. But the results, as we have asked for, oats, pelv, alfalfa, so I think they remain interesting because they are asking for new species in the same way.
Thanks for the presentation and talking about the evaluation of the collection and the need for more extensive evaluation because, as you pointed out, having that wonderful collection is great, but knowing what it might be good for is ultimately what's going to help solve our agricultural problems now and in the future. And I didn't talk about it in my talk, but there are some parts of these crop germplasm committees activities that involve looking for people that are willing to evaluate materials. And if you as evaluators in your fields feel like you have some expertise and want to undertake evaluations, if you have a disease that you feel might the collection may benefit from your evaluation, would be useful, would be good information to get. And if you feel like it would be desirable to have a better flavor of whatever crop you're looking for, and you have the means and interest in evaluating that, as Mr. Loftus has talked about, I think that's very, very exciting to get involved in those evaluations. And I'd say, even if you have only a couple of accessions from the collection that you've looked at and you have some favorable or unfavorable impressions about them, share that, because if you look at that collection, much of it has very little interesting data for anybody that wants to actually grow it. But a problem that's going to come up in the future as we look at the collections is there's a big push for collecting wild relatives of our crops. And there's not too much interest in evaluating those until there's a major disaster on its way. And it'll be valuable to have that, but it's typically when there are major diseases, let's say, or we're having some of our problems with abiotic stress come in. I think those wild relatives will be even more important, but they're not very popular for evaluation simply because in many cases you don't want to bother tasting them because they don't taste very good, or you can't cook them properly. But there's some important genetic resources there that we may need to tap into in the future. But thanks for the presentation. Thanks for both of your presentations.
Any last questions or comments? Okay, we get a round of applause for our presenters.